All right, with the Euros now over, I'm all yours again. That's it. That's all the football this summer, and for the next 6 weeks, there's nothing left to distract me. Well, I mean, I will be staying up until 3 in the morning to watch the pre-season games, obviously, but apart from those... The football is back, but you'd be forgiven in thinking that it barely went away. Following a lengthy 51-match Euro 2024, the Premier League was back in action less than 5 weeks later, the Championship and the remainder of the English Football League even sooner than that. Of course, it would be silly to assume that there was no football whatsoever in those 5 long weeks following the end of the Euros, as pre-season now acts as another opportunity to play more football matches, often in foreign markets thousands of miles away. With a full domestic campaign underway, the EFL Cup already in action, an international window on the horizon, the FA Cup due to start, 3 separate European club tournaments on their way, and a post-season now featuring an expanded 32-team Club World Cup, there is an awful lot of football still to come. By now, it seems everyone in the game has accepted that there is too much football. There are concerns regarding football's overexposure, a perceived decline in quality or entertainment, player welfare, and audience fatigue. All manner of people involved in the game at all levels have spoken out about it. And yet, so far, there has been no meaningful action in rectifying it. The football ecosystem has always been a complex machine, with each cog requiring different priorities to continue to turn. The broadcaster, the federation, the manager, and the player, as they all interlock and intertwine to produce the most watched and best loved sport in the world. But with the machine now firing on all cylinders, smoke pouring out of its exhausts, and the unmistakable sounds of the gears beginning to rust and to grind on one another, the question is, which cog in the system is willing to be sacrificed to make the machine run better as a whole? Who is to blame for the incredible workload modern professional footballers are subjected to, and who should shoulder the responsibility in helping to alleviate it? Let's start with the broadcasters. Modern football is almost entirely driven by TV revenue money, with match day gate receipts from fans in the ground a mere footnote on the financial reports of all the biggest clubs. Through their customers in Sky Sports, TNT Sports and Amazon Prime, domestically, the Premier League raked in $5 billion in their latest deal. The Premier League also banks $5 billion more when it sells those rights to broadcast the English top division through its international partners. This is an eye-watering amount of money which can only be demanded due to the return on investment it promises. UK television broadcasters are coy when disclosing exact viewership figures, but a Sunday Times article from November 2023 revealed that each Premier League game averages around 1.78 million viewers domestically. Sky Sports revealed that the opening weekend of the 23-24 Premier League season saw more than 8 million viewers tune in to the first 5 games, a number up 40% from the previous season. Across the pond, the 23-24 season drew its best average audience ever, with an average of 546,000 viewers per game among US audiences, a value that has risen year on year every year since 2013-14. Sticking with US television ratings, the 23-24 Champions League final was up 6% on last season. The Euro 2024 final was up 7% over the 2021 edition, and the Copa America final was the most watched Copa America final of all time. All this to say, if there is a breaking point regarding viewer fatigue, well, we haven't reached it yet. There may be more football than ever, and more ways to watch the football than ever, but the numbers show television audiences are also tuning in more than ever before. While broadcasters must have a niggling voice in the back of their minds in regards to player welfare, the quality of each game, and the oversaturation of coverage, the numbers show that, for now, they simply do not need to be worried. The appetite for football live on television is not only gargantuan, but somehow still growing. No one cares more about the bottom line than those with billions of dollars at stake, and if we do see viewership figures beginning to wobble, they'll be the first to course correct. But until then, the thought of an expanded Club World Cup, an expanded 48-team World Cup, and Premier League clubs jetting off to play pre-season games across the United States and other growing international markets must be a scintillating one, and one that broadcasters can't be blamed for being entirely bullish on. Which brings us on to the organisations that are falling over backwards to provide the TV broadcasters with as much football as possible, and that's the federations. Let's start with FIFA, who, not content with their expansion of the World Cup from 2026 onwards, have also expanded their club-based competition with the newly formatted Club World Cup, featuring 32 teams starting in the summer of 2025. FIFA have made it clear that the $7 billion generated from the 2022 World Cup cycle isn't enough. But it's not just big bad FIFA who are at it, as UEFA have got in on the act too. After already expanding the European Championship thrice since the competition's inception, UEFA, not content with the €4 billion in revenue from their last European cycle, will debut a newly expanded Champions League format this season, set to feature 64 more matches and 64 more reasons for television broadcasters to be interested. But while it may seem that these moves are just blatant acts of selfish cash grabs, both organisations can argue that they are run as not-for-profit and will rightly claim that they reinvest vast sums of money back into the sport via prize money, football education and development, refereeing, and payments out to their member nations or member clubs. The harsh reality is that FIFA and UEFA need money to survive, and it's hard to imagine what the sport would even look like without them. There's an argument to be made that the more money they make, the more money there is to reinvest back into the game. But it's not just FIFA and UEFA adding games to the football calendar, as both La Liga and Serie A in recent years have expanded their Super Cups, their Community Shield equivalents, into 14 tournaments, with both competitions taking place in Saudi Arabia this year. And a variety of European leagues have long stated their interest in allowing some of their domestic league games to be played abroad. While the prospect of Manchester City versus Manchester United taking place at the MetLife Stadium rather than the Etihad technically isn't adding another football match to the bloated football calendar, it does incur a 6,000-mile round trip for the players that they previously wouldn't have been subjected to. Unlike the broadcasters, all the previously mentioned organisations undoubtedly have a duty of care towards player welfare and maintaining the health of the game, both as a successful product and one that future generations will be interested in, whether with the intention of generating more money to reinvest back into the game, to promote their domestic league to a wider audience, or to simply fill the pockets of their boards a little further. It seems that they have all agreed that added revenue streams in the form of more football matches is the priority. Which brings us on to the football clubs themselves. Football players are extremely valuable assets to clubs, and ones that they don't want depreciating in value and underperforming. Clubs have a duty of care, even more so than the federations, to ensure their employees are treated as best as they possibly can be, and all the top clubs in the world go to great lengths to ensure this in a multitude of ways. And yet, when push comes to shove, When there's an opportunity to fly the team thousands of miles away to play exhibition matches in a foreign market, they take them. In recent years, it's become the standard. Manchester United, Arsenal and Liverpool all played games stateside in their pre-season tours before the 2024-25 season, while Spurs trekked out to Japan and South Korea. On the subject of Tottenham Hotspur, they flew out their squad to play in a post-season friendly match against Newcastle United. Both teams, following a 40-plus game season, fielded strong squads full of first-team players in what I must assume was owing to contractual obligations. But those in charge of running football clubs know more than anyone else the harsh realities of staying competitive. If you're a club standing still, you're falling behind. And if you're not taking advantage of every revenue stream you can possibly get your hands on, you're risking allowing your club to be left behind. The owners and the board are beholden to the success of their club on the pitch and the demands of fans who fill their stadiums. They will argue that they have a huge degree of responsibility to provide the team with the revenue to be as competitive as possible. And so, despite the threat of their precious assets depreciating by playing football matches in blazing temperatures and on less than perfect pitches, the financial and commercial opportunities of playing abroad is seen by clubs as just too lucrative to pass up. Managers often bemoan the abundance of the modern football calendar and consistently and openly question the amount of matches their stretched squads are forced to endure over the course of a season. While managers cannot control the fixture schedule they are handed, they are afforded free rein to pick their matchday squads and which players play and which ones do not. Every name you can possibly think of has had a pop at the fixture schedule at some point or another, from Jurgen Klopp to Pep Guardiola to Mikel Arteta to Carlo Ancelotti, the latter of which came out and stated his desire for Real Madrid to pull out of the expanded 2025 Club World Cup, only for Real Madrid to put out a statement overturning him and confirming Real Madrid's participation in the upcoming tournament. If player welfare is at the forefront of their minds, like managers so often communicate that it is, then we should see a growing trend of them prioritising this in their team selections. After all, football squads are big. The top teams have so much financial clout that they can afford strength and depth in every position, and since 2022, the IFAB permanently approved an increase in the amount of substitutions per game from 3 to 5 in all top-level competitions. According to data provided by Opta, in the 2023-24 season, no top-flight team had started fewer individual players than Manchester City, while Arsenal ranked joint second fewest. Despite the concerns levelled by both managers, neither Guardiola nor Arteta gave the fringe members of their squads any significant number of starts and relied heavily on playing the same vital players frequently, whether it was beneficial for the individual or otherwise. Rodri and Foden played over 4,000 minutes for City last season. Declan Rice played over 3,000 for Arsenal. Even just as a fan, it was actually quite hard last season to constantly watch Bukayo Saka take to the pitch, get kicked all game, limp off at the final whistle, and then fulfill another 90 minutes away in Europe just 3 days later. Even outside of Manchester City and Arsenal, I'm sure it's not a difficult task to think of a player who plays for your club who last season was run into the ground, played despite not being fit, or was rushed back too quickly from injury. While I do believe that managers genuinely care about player welfare and they genuinely believe that the fixture schedule is too much, they also find themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. Football management is one of the most cutthroat and unforgiving professions in the world, and a run of bad games for anyone at any time can spell the end of their time as manager of their football club, kicked back into the pool of unemployed coaches with no guarantees on where, if anywhere, they may land. Rodri needs a rest, but Pep Guardiola must win football matches with Manchester City. Lamine Yamal is literally a child, but get on the pitch, mate. I need you to win me football matches. In the dog-eat-dog world of professional football management, no manager will ever be thanked for erring on the side of caution and resting players if not absolutely required. You win football matches or you get the sack. And lastly, the final cog in their proverbial football machine, the players, whom the grueling fixture schedule obviously impacts the most. This modern iteration of elite football players are tasked with a level of playing time far above the generations that came before them. In 2023, FIFPro, the organisation that represents 65,000 professional footballers worldwide, posted a report breaking down various statistics regarding the workload the players are subjected to. In the report, it shows how Jude Bellingham had played 14,445 minutes for club and country before he turned 20 years old. This is compared to key England players of previous generations and shows how many more minutes Bellingham has in his legs at the age of 20 compared with his previous peers. Before turning 20, David Beckham had only played a total of 829 professional minutes, around 17 times less than Jude Bellingham. There is no doubt that elite professional footballers are subjected to a workload on a scale never before seen. So why is it then that you very rarely see elite players speaking out about the schedule or protesting against it? While it's easy to find examples of managers from practically every club across Europe bemoaning the fixture schedule, in my research I couldn't even find one high-profile example of a player doing so. And that's because I think there's two things happening here. Firstly, not all players feel the same or are subjected to the same fixture schedule. While Declan Rice, Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr. and Bukayo Saka play every single game for their club and country week in and week out, this is not the same for thousands upon thousands of professional footballers at all levels. While Rodri might be feeling the effects of 4,327 minutes in his legs and must absolutely hate the physical toil the fixture schedule has placed upon him, I'm willing to bet that the likes of Calvin Phillips and Mateus Nunes feel the complete opposite. More football matches means more chances for players and more games that will allow fringe members of squads to get their chance to shine and show the manager what they can do. While the prospect of an expanded Club World Cup must send a shiver down the spine of Jude Bellingham, who at the grand age of 21 years old already rocks up to games wearing knee strapping and a shoulder brace, if you're someone like Arda Güler, you must secretly be rubbing your hands together at the prospect of more chances to pull on the Real Madrid shirt and try and stake your place in the team. And secondly, the mentality of an elite professional footballer is one that not only accepts adversity but thrives amongst it. You've got to remember that these players love playing football more than anything else in the world. These are players who, from ages as young as 8 years old, have been moulded into the mindset required to rise above challenges and overcome them. Declan Rice, in an interview from October 2022, stated that he was determined to play as many games as possible, even going as far as pushing himself to see just how many games he could physically get in. Quote, "When the season was closing up, I was trying to see how many I could get. From the Euros to the end of the season was 68, and I was thinking, how can I get 70 in? I just wanted to keep pushing and get as many as possible. I feel like the more games I play, I don't like to rest. You only get one career and you want to maximise that. When you hit that amount of games, it is a proud moment for yourself." Arteta will bemoan the fixture schedule. Arsenal fans will wince at the sight of Declan Rice trotting out for another 90 minutes. But Declan Rice wants to play every minute, and there is no situation where he would welcome being dropped to the bench. I'm sure this mentality also applies to hundreds upon hundreds of elite professional footballers at the top of the game. And with that, professional football has found itself deep in a conundrum. Each individual entity in the game has a justification for why the fixture pile-up is the way that it is, and each one has a valid excuse to pass responsibility onto the next. The broadcasters can argue that they're the ones that fund the modern game and they're just giving audiences what they want, and it's the responsibility of the federations to govern and monitor player welfare. It's not their problem. The federations will argue that a larger fixture schedule ultimately brings in unmatched commercial opportunities, the profits of which are reinvested back into the sport. They aren't forcing Rodri as an individual to play 4,000 minutes. It's the responsibility of the clubs to look after their own employees. The clubs can say that their hands are tied with the fixture schedule, and the board need to provide a level of funding and resource to ensure the team is as competitive as it can be for their devoted fans. Missing out on millions upon millions of pounds by not expanding into foreign markets is not going to help the matter. Besides, if the players need a rest, then that's down to the management, who pick the squad and select the team each week. The managers will claim that they're employed to win football matches, and if they don't win football matches, they'll get the sack. The fixture schedule is not an excuse, and they and everyone else knows it. Besides, the players come to them all the time and they demand to play, and they consistently state that they are happy to play. Who are they to argue with that? And the players are mentality monsters, athletic marvels, driven by their love for the sport and their desire to be the best, to prove themselves, or to break out on the world stage. When football is all that you know, what is there to even do if you're not playing football? They dreamed of the day they would pull on the shirt and play for their country or in the Champions League. They aren't giving up a single opportunity to do so. Now they've got there. Football is stuck in an entangled web of moving pieces thrashing around each other to create more entanglement. It's crabs in a bucket as each integral quantity pulls down another to reach a little higher in the arms race to be the best. Even if you could wave a magic wand and pin the responsibility on a single one in finality, that still won't solve everything. You could argue that clubs shouldn't be allowed to jet their squads off for pre- and post-season friendlies, but which clubs? What about the ones not playing in Europe, or the ones who are knocked out of domestic cup competitions early? Should they not be allowed to take advantage of the commercial benefits of pre-season abroad? Is that fair? You could argue that the federations need to put a stop to the ever-growing schedule and trim the season down, but which federations and from which competition do matches need to be cut? Competitions like the League Cup might seem like the obvious starting point, but the League Cup is a domestic cup competition that has been around for 64 years, longer than the likes of the Europa and Conference Leagues. The League Cup is an important revenue stream for the EFL, the organising body of the competition. Why should the EFL be the ones to miss out and not UEFA or FIFA or the Premier League? In a bid to help ease fixture congestion, FA Cup replays have already been scrapped for the 2024-25 season onwards, an English tradition that dates back as far as 1871 thrown in the bin because of selfish actions from other governing bodies around them. FA Cup replays had not only been a staple of the competition since its very inception, but had been a staple of English football for over 150 years. It's a genuine travesty. Why is it that the English FA and the EFL must be the ones to lose out, just so other governing bodies in world football can continue to bend over backwards to placate the whims of big club fans stationed thousands upon thousands of miles away in foreign markets who don't give a single fuck about the lower tiers of English football or the time-honoured traditions that built the very pyramid that they are now fans of. As made obvious by my tone and demeanour throughout this video, it'll be no surprise for you to hear that I am categorically not in favour of the upcoming FIFA Club World Cup expansion, but you know, why should UEFA have a monopoly on international club competition? Just because it's always been that way? Why should FIFA be denied a potentially game-changing revenue stream for their not-for-profit organisation just because UEFA got there first? Who says there should only be one international club competition? And if there has to be only one, does UEFA have some God-given right that states it must be theirs and no one else's? I mean, UEFA already rakes in money from loads of club and international cup competitions, while FIFA only really have the World Cup. Why shouldn't FIFA be entitled to a slice of the pie? When you consider all the permutations, your head begins to spin. Not only is each entity out for themselves, but subdivisions within those entities are also competing among one another. The game desperately needs one or more of these elements to selflessly take a fall, even if it inadvertently hands the advantage to another. A seemingly impossible task when considering the harsh reality of the economics of football. The only way I can see things changing is if the players take a stand. When all is said and done, if the players were to boycott, everyone involved in determining the football calendar would listen. There is no money to be made if there is no football to be played, and there is no football to be played if the players refuse to play. But the task of galvanising a community of professionals around a goal that many of its members will not even subscribe to is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. And why should it sit on their shoulders anyway? Surely professional footballers should just be tasked with just playing football, and those above them should be ensuring their welfare. Instead, the all-consuming love footballers have for playing football has been harnessed, abused and exploited by those who govern above them. In conclusion, it's hard to argue anything apart from that the football schedule is incredibly bloated and close to breaking point. However, until the viewing figures begin to dwindle, the money begins to dry up, or the players fight against everything they know and stand up, nothing can change. If the football calendar continues to expand, the bubble will burst eventually. That is for certain. I just hope that the powers that be can intervene before we get to that moment, and that differences can be put aside for the greater good of the game and the professionals who play it. With no football on for the rest of the summer, I decided to get into a sport which is played during the months of July and August, and I started watching a bit of Major League Baseball. How many games do these teams play a season again?